Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV and ask the question...
Does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood?
My name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And today is the day of reckoning. I've been waiting for this day for so long. This was one of the first things I wanted to do when we started our podcast.
Why?
Because it's one of those, it's like, you know, there's a thing called like a forgot buster, like a huge blockbuster movie that everybody had to see, but nobody kind of really remembers it. And I feel like that's where ABC Afterschool Specials and their derivatives on other networks that we'll talk about later, I feel like that's where they fall. It's like this huge thing that was part of childhoods of like Gen-Xers mostly and some elder millennials. And it was like it was appointment TV sometimes. Like you'd like be like, oh, they're going to talk about this. Let's go home. But also because they're awful, and I think it's going to be hilarious to talk about.
I think you had a different type of appointment TV than I did.
No, like, it was a thing, like, after school at 3 o'clock. We'll talk about it in our memories. At any rate, we are talking today about ABC Afterschool Specials, and you can find those really only on YouTube, because they're not anywhere else.
That's where you find them.
So, before we get into that...
It's our non-sponsored snack review time.
All right. So, in going with our theme, like, I thought, what do you eat after school? Or in this case, what do you grab to drink? And the one answer is Sunny Delight. The other answer is purple stuff. But the third answer is
Capri Sun.
Capri Sun. And you take them in lunchboxes. And, okay, this is precarious because we do have... They have a kind with a twist top. But we have, like, the original... poke the hole with the straw.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be doing this. I'm
going
to get it.
Suckers.
I'm going to get it all. Oh, I did it.
Nice job.
All right. I don't know that I've ever actually had Capri Sun.
Okay. Interesting.
So, at least that I can remember. So, I'm going to try it now.
Go for it. Capri Suns are excellent. As those of you who don't know, they're the foil-packed... like fruit punch. There was a number of different flavors. Fruit punch, I feel like, is the most popular, but there's a lot of different flavors of it, and most of us saw them in our childhood. You either got it packed in your lunch, or on a field trip, or like if you went to a picnic. A lot of times, this, and it still is today, to my, a lot of places I've gone, it's kind of like the go-to if you know there's going to be a bunch of kids at a place and you have to get drinks.
Which is actually how I got this pack. Somebody had a party for kids, and they had some Capri Sun left over, and I said... Can I grab one of those for our podcast? And they were like, that's a weird question, Megan. But yeah, the father of Capri Sun is Rudolph Wild. In 1931, he founded this company, and he, in Germany.
Yep. And
he specialized in raw materials for food products, and he really wanted just natural food products, no chemicals. In 1969... Capri Sun, Sonne. And its inspiration was the sun at Capri, like in Italy.
Okay.
So it's named after an island in Italy, but he's German.
Interesting. So when did they change it to Sun?
Well, I think it's still Sonne in other countries.
Okay.
Right. So 1969, yeah, the stand-up foil pouch... the first flavors were just lemon and orange.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then in 1973, people wanted a supply at home. So I guess they were just sold like how you can grab a can of pop at 7-Eleven or something.
They were probably sold at like kiosk kind of things, like on the beach and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then what really took it into the stratosphere, 1979, boxing sports legend Muhammad Ali became their international spokesperson, except it still wasn't in the U.S. yet. So it was still sold internationally in Europe, and like a lot of celebrities do those ads, like because they can make so much money. So he became their spokesperson, and it blew up. By 1980, it was in Africa and Asia. And that's when it also had the straw in the pouch design. So I guess before that, maybe it had like something that you'd peel open.
Oh, you had to cut the corner, maybe?
Maybe. And then by 1982, That's when it launched in the U.S. So that's why it's such a big part of our childhoods, because
it launched in 82.
In 82, and it won awards for the U.S. medal for packaging of the year. I didn't know you could win a medal for that.
For packaging of the year, huh?
And best new product.
Because of the foil stand-up pouch?
Because the foil stand-up pouch. By 92, it was a leader in Europe, so it was number one in its market for like fruit juices and stuff. And by 94, it was a leader in the U.S. In 2004, 5 billion drink pouches had been sold worldwide.
That doesn't surprise me. They go like crazy.
And by 2007, that's where they had the twist-off cap. They also sent it to the International Space Station in 2010. And now it's in 119 countries around the world. And I have to say, I enjoyed this a little more than I thought I would. I don't love fruit punch flavored things. I can taste the apple and the cherry.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of as I drank it, and I've had a Capri Sun, but it's been a little while. But what it reminds me of a little bit is Juicy Juice, which I've mentioned before on this podcast, because it was all natural ingredients, and so is this. So it has that flavor of like, it doesn't have like the chemically fake fruit punch flavor that a lot of drinks do. It really does taste like mixed fruit.
Like basically. Hawaiian Punch, I don't care for.
Right.
I'm not a big juice person, so my rating on this is going to be subjective. Having said that, I full on expected to give this a 1, and I'm not going to.
I didn't drink these a lot as far as my memory as a kid, but I mean, occasionally I would have one. But when I was in college, I stocked overnight at a grocery store as a job while I was going to school, and this was a really easy stock. I remember Capri Suns a lot because they come in a long cardboard box with 10 Capri Suns, right? Which is really ingenious because the cardboard box is kind of thick, so it keeps the pouches from getting punctured and leak.
Okay.
Right? And they stack really easily and really fast when you're actually filling shelves.
That's funny.
So Capri Suns were like a gimme.
Yeah, I remember everybody taking these on a field trip, but as I mentioned in one of our other recent podcasts, I would have a frozen
Yoo-hoo.
Nesquik.
Okay.
Because the Yoo-hoo were in glass bottles,
That's
as
true.
we recalled. Yeah, I would have a frozen Nesquik because I'm not like a juice person. I also can't really digest milk that well, so the field trips I remember just feeling sick by
That's
the
why
end
you
of
would have
them.
been better with Yoo-hoo, which is like chocolate water.
Yeah, I can't even look at a Yoo-hoo. I don't know that we'll ever review it on this podcast because I can't look at it. They do Yoo-hoos in cardboard
boxes with straws now.
Yeah.
But for a long time during my childhood, at least, I know they were in glass bottles.
Yeah. So, what are we rating out of...
I don't know. Textbooks?
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Reading Rainbow last time was just books.
So now we're being specific.
We're being specific. If you haven't been with us before, we pick something random but kind of connected to whatever we're talking about to rate. It's 1 out of 5 for the snack, 1 out of 10 for the show. So I'm going to give Capri Sun a 3. It's okay. It's better than I thought it would be. I'm not a juice person. It's a little sweet for me. Yeah, that's my rating. 3. 3 out of 5 for Megan. What about you?
I'm going to give it a 4 because it does take me back to we drank a lot of juice as kids because we weren't allowed to have soda or anything. And so it takes me back to my youth a little bit with that taste. So I'm going to go with a 4.
Okay, so...
Yeah! 3.5
textbooks out of 5.
Right.
3.5 out of 5 textbooks for the snack. So the after school special, Steve, I know usually you do the summary. Do you want to summarize briefly the 2 that we watched? Or do you want to kind of summarize what the after school special was?
Yeah, let's discuss the after school special. What it was in general, right?
And then I can give some history and fun facts.
Because this is kind of like when you have a show where you talk about what the show's overall theme is, and then we talk about episodes.
Yeah, that works.
And that's really what this was, because there were episodes, 45 minutes or so. ABC after school specials were really, they were short movies, about an hour with commercials, right? 45 minutes if you're watching on YouTube. And the whole purpose was they were supposed to have actors who were kids or looked like kids and were in situations that teens and adolescents might run into in real life, right? So they were supposed to teach you things about like stranger danger or, is we're going to see hitchhiking,
alcohol
use, drugs, right? All that kind of thing, peer pressure, bullying, right? Any issues that you might come into that you might experience as a teen or an adolescent. This special was supposed to kind of show you the bad part and then what should happen or how to kind of help.
Yeah, that's a great description. So right here, I just want to pause. We don't normally do trigger warnings for this show. There are a lot of sensitive things that we're going to be talking about that were in the episodes we watched and also in general as we talk about these shows. And the reason I'm doing a trigger warning is not just because of the material. We are going to talk about things like drug use, sexual assault, that kind of thing. But also because we're going to be making fun of it. And we're not making fun of the alcohol use or the sexual assault, obviously.
But the acting and storytelling, possibly.
And the general idea of the ABC Afterschool Special, because they are kind of ridiculous.
This is a nostalgic, cynical look back.
Right, we do say that. Sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical. This is going to be a little bit of both. So I just don't want people to at me on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Please don't write into me and being like, how dare you laugh about a situation that's sensitive or whatever, because we're not laughing at the situation. We're laughing at how it's handled by people who very clearly are not teenagers. Steve, the ABC After School Special, they ran these from 1972 until 1997.
Yes.
Which is a way longer time than I thought.
It was 25 seasons.
CBS also then started up school break specials to compete, and those ran from 78 until 96.
Okay.
What I noticed when I looked at the titles and the actors in CBS specials, they tried to bring in bigger name stars to compete with ABC After School Specials because ABC was more established already. Then we also had a shorter-lived NBC... I can't even say this. NBC Special Treat.
Oh, good.
Just a little special treat, Steve. And those ran from 75 to 86. What I noticed about the NBC specials is that unlike ABC and CBS, these were not always based in teen stories. So sometimes they were sci-fi, sometimes they were based on classic books, sometimes they were documentaries.
Okay, so they were just stories for kids.
Yeah, they were meant for teens, and I would say too, even the ABC After School Specials, looking at the titles and of not the ones that are just on YouTube, but overall, they're a lot more varied than I thought they would be. Like, I thought these were all like problem stories.
Okay.
But basically, there was programming for kids, families, and adults, but not anything actually aimed at teenagers. I will also say, the idea of the teenager kind of started in the 1950s. By the 1970s, teenagers really started to have like purchasing power, right? Yes. So you can advertise to them. You also have, and I think I've mentioned this on the show before, around this same time in the 1970s, you have nascent stages, the beginning stages of young adult literature.
Right.
So not just books for kids or adults, but specifically for teenagers. And so what happened is that there's this executive named Martin Tassi, and he was the child of alcoholics. Mm-hmm. He grew up kind of lonely, and he wanted to do programming for kids who were like him. And he thought, what if we had shows like, if I was the child of an alcoholic, I didn't have anywhere to turn, nobody to tell me what to do or how to kind of handle the situation. Right. And that's kind of how he got the idea for the After School Special. So what he turned to for scripts were this new YA genre. Okay. And so a lot of the things, including one of the ones that we watched, was a book that they optioned to make into an after-school special. Right. But they wanted to focus on teens solving their own problems, which we're going to talk about, especially with the first one we watched, that they wanted to have parents could be there, but they weren't going to be the ones to solve the problem, right? That this was going to be a teen or a teen and their peers kind of figuring out what to do. And in that way, kind of empower the viewer to know what to do in this situation. And it's really this idea of like, you know, by that point, people were saying like TV rots your brain, right?
Right.
And we talked about last time with Reading Rainbow, TV having this potential for education. And they kind of saw it the same way. It has a potential for education, but also social change.
Right.
And there's like a lot of political stuff in the background about like not having crappy programming.
Right. And we've talked about that with cartoons that we've discussed too. Right?
Yeah,
Remember
definitely.
Transformers, G.I. Joe, 80s cartoons, they had to tone the violence down, but also like G.I. Joe had knowing is half the battle, where they had to give like little messages at the back at the end.
So they had this gap where it's like after soap operas and before the news, and nobody's really watching TV at that point in time, except the teens who come home from school.
You're talking like 3 to 6, right?
Right, exactly. So there's all these latchkey kids, which was a big thing when we were growing up, right? Like a newer thing because kids had moms who worked, like ours did. And so there's unsupervised teens at home, and instead of giving them reruns, why not give them programming? The first year when I looked at it, like some were animated, some were historical fiction. There was one about like the Underground Railroad.
They probably didn't really know where they wanted to go.
Yeah, and then later they became contemporary stories. So issues like bullying, puberty, stepfamilies, starting your own business as a teen.
Oh, okay.
First love, pregnancy, homelessness, AIDS later on.
Okay.
Shoplifting, suicide, marriage.
So all these different
things. What's interesting to me is too that they tried to tackle things like kind of normal things like, hey, I'm overweight, right? But they also would tackle things like eating disorders specifically. They also tried to do a lot of cultural diversity so that it was for any kid watching.
Right.
Not just like suburban white kids watching.
Yeah.
What's interesting too is that I think because they're kind of lost, it's difficult to tell like which were on ABC, which were CBS, which were NBC.
Right.
But so I'm just going to talk in general. Some of the stars. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Rob Lowe, John Travolta, Sam Rockwell, Michael Jackson, Rosanna Arquette, Jodie Foster, Drew Barrymore, Tatum O'Neal, Corey Feldman, Melissa Sue Anderson, Beau Bridges, Ralph Macchio, like
basically your 80s all-stars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In 1992, they hired Oprah. They were like, this is kind of flagging a little bit. Let's hire Oprah and have her kind of do the programming and decide which topics the teens are going to hear about.
And did she like MC that? But did she like was she like?
I don't think so. I think that they just like hired her to do behind the scenes.
Okay.
They might have had a couple that were like presented by Oprah, but I don't think that she came and talked from what I can tell. Sometimes, you know, especially as we talk about them, we're going to talk about the way that they didn't age well, so we'll kind of get into that later. Like, a lot of these are like, it's okay if you're disabled as long as you can overcome it.
Yeah.
Like, maybe, like, you're deaf and you just live a different way. You don't have to, like, overcome anything. And essentially, here's what killed it. A couple of things. Mm-hmm. Number one, that people who are our age and elder millennials are very cynical, and we're like, stop trying to teach me something.
Yes.
And especially in this corny way. A lot of them too, the same problems and cliches. I mean, I will get into this in memories, but like I watched a bunch of these about eating disorders. How much can you say?
Right.
It's going to be kind of the same story. And then the other thing that happened is just a shift in storytelling. You know, you have young adult books become way more sophisticated. By the end of the 96, you're talking about Harry Potter comes out right around that.
Yeah.
Right? So you have TV shows like Veronica Mars. The whole first season is her investigating her own sexual assault.
Right.
Done in a way more interesting way where she's also cynical about the situation. Right? You have things like Law and Order SVU, which deals with that same topic. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the OC. So there's more teen shows that are being done in prime time and doing some of these topics better.
A little bit,
yeah.
Too. The other thing, too, is they really had a tremendous run, 25 years, right? But they had, unfortunately, that 72 to 97, right? Unfortunately, it straddled 2 generations.
Yes.
When it first came on, they were really showing boomers. Because baby boomers would have been teens in 72. Most Gen Xers would have been younger. Even the earlier Gen Xers were 65.
Yeah,
They would have only been 7 years old.
Right. So
at the earliest.
I'm thinking about... Yeah, so I'm thinking about, like, my Aunt Heather was a surprise.
Right.
So she's in our generation, but she's about, I think she's 12 years older than we are, 13 maybe. So she would have watched them in the late 70s. But yeah,
my parents would have been 16 and younger.
Yeah.
You know, in their baby boomers.
Yeah, that's true.
They're the end of it, and then we, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, because my parents would have been, I mean, they were engaged by 72. Right. So they're clearly out of it. But you're right. Your parents, the tail end of the boomer generation, and then into the Gen X, and then also millennials as well, because, like, the older millennials, by 96, many of them are teenagers, right?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean...
Gen X kind of ends in 80.
Right.
So you're talking about by 96, yes, a lot of the older millennials are going to be 16 by now.
Yeah, the very tail end of Gen X would have been 16, 17.
I think for the most part, this is for the most part, by the time they found their stride, knew what they were doing, all 3 networks were doing it. You're talking about the entire generation of
they got all of Gen X, but when they started, they had teenagers that were baby boomers who were a lot less cynical than the Gen Xers they then moved into.
That's true. I will say, too, that, just to kind of round this out, that the storytelling here that we're going to be making fun of a little bit is very much, here's the plot. It's like one plot, A to B. And in a lot of the shows I talked about, you know, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, we're going to visit in October.
Yep.
So coming up soon. If you think about that, there's an A plot, a B plot, and sometimes a C plot. There's multiple, you have one story sometimes as an arc, especially in later seasons, where it's 4 or 5 episodes until they resolve it, right? So the storytelling, I think, is part of the reason that people are so cynical, because, and it does seem a little dull.
Right.
When watching it, and it seems kind of old-fashioned.
And I think, you know, just speaking from my own standpoint as a Gen Xer and being kind of a cynical, you know, smart mouth that I can be, right, to just put it nicely, you know, I would have been that way. I would have, because I didn't watch a lot of these, but I would have seen it and been like, wait a second, you're going to, like, cure domestic violence in 45 minutes? Like, really? You know?
Yeah. Exactly. So, so that's a little bit of the history, how it came about, what they were trying to do, how it succeeded for a certain period of time. You had people talking about issues that really weren't on TV at that point. And then after a while, because people get used to seeing it over and over and over, you know, it served its purpose. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
So we're going to take our break here. When we come back, we'll talk about our memories or lack thereof, and then we'll get into our full review and recap.
Yep. Don't go away.
This podcast is supported by its creators
and listeners like you.
Help keep our show ad-free by visiting our website, stopruiningmychildhood.com.
There you can find links to our social media.
And this very podcast you're currently listening to.
Both Megan and I are authors, and you can find links to our books on our About page.
And on our Watch With Us page, you can find videos and links for all the shows and movies we discuss on the podcast.
And more importantly, links to buy the nostalgic snacks we review as well.
We also post bonus content about once a month.
So like, subscribe, and follow.
For a small independent podcast like ours, it really does make a difference. Thanks. And now, back to the show. All right, everybody. Well, hopefully you didn't go away or change the channel?
I'm trying a new catchphrase.
I don't know about it. I'm Megan.
And I'm Steve. Don't switch that podcast. How's that sound?
I don't know.
I don't know how to do that.
They're like, we heard these guys on Zabe's podcast, and now we're not so sure.
Yeah.
If you didn't, we did a guest spot on Who Will Save Generation X, which is a lot of what we're talking about today.
Things
that Gen Xers remember that everybody else has forgotten. So what are some of your memories about after-school specials?
As I mentioned before the break, I didn't watch a lot of these. I remember them being out there, but it was, to me, I guess, as that cynical Gen Xer, I was like, no. Like, I would rather watch cartoons, even as a teenager, or I'd rather watch, or I was watching movies and stuff. Like, I was jumped into, to me, an after-school special, while they were geared towards teens, they were probably watched by, 12, 13-year-olds more.
So that's what I was actually going to say, that the ones that I remember in middle school people talking about different ones that were going to come on.
Yeah.
And I remember I really wanted to find one that I could not find, and it's this true story of a girl who got stood up for the prom, and then she sued the guy who stood her up. Mm-hmm. Because she had to pay for her dress and her part of the limo and her course, all these her makeup and her hair and stuff. But it was things like that. But you're right when I think about it. So I would have been, for lack of a better word, daycare, K through 5 or K to 4.
Yeah.
In 5th grade, I started babysitting, so I was 11 by that point. And then I would come home from school, and I had a gap between, my parents were both teachers, but I had a gap between when they came home and when I was home. So, I would watch some ABC after school specials, and in particular, so I struggled with some eating disorders around that time. Mm-hmm. And I basically, I don't want to put it this way, but I watched them for tips about what to do.
Good.
So totally the opposite of, it's a pretty girl who's thin on TV and she's telling you how she got that way. I mean, that's kind of how I looked at it.
People are like, don't do this. And Megan was like, she's got a notebook out and she's like, maybe.
Well, that's the problem with some of these, is that they're framed the wrong way. And in the case of the ones with eating disorders, they kind of ended up glamorizing it a little bit. Having said that, I think it did interest me of, I'm not going through some of this stuff, but I know other people who are, maybe I could talk, that it did open the door to talking to some of my friends about some of the stuff they were going through. I had a friend whose parents went through a very horrible divorce, and her one of her parents had in a small town, a fairly public affair.
Yeah.
Right. And that was something that I remember she was like, it's kind of like what was just on TV, but again, in 5th grade, not in 11th, 12th.
Right.
Which I think is kind of who they were trying to aim for, but it was really
a lot
tweens.
Of times, even still today, kids usually are watching up.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Your teens are watching adult stuff.
Right.
Your preteens are watching teen stuff because they want to be older.
But I agree with you on the fact that many of these, I was like, oh, this is just awful.
Yeah.
And especially, we've talked about storytelling and how both of us feel about that. And I mentioned this on, I think our 3rd episode is when we did Cheers, 2nd or 3rd. I ended up watching just a lot of reruns of Cheers eventually.
Yeah.
6th, 7th, 8th grade.
And as I think about it also, adolescence and teens, my middle school, high school years, at that stage in my life, my parents didn't let us watch TV after school. We got home, me and my 2 brothers, and we either had to do homework or go outside and play.
Right.
We weren't allowed a whole lot of TV time. If we were watching TV, it might be later at night, prime time. We might watch Full House, Step by Step, things that came on later.
That's because Dawn was home, though, right?
Yes, at that point.
So, if you had gone through that when you were a latchkey kid before that...
Then I might have watched them,
because that's the thing.
But at this point, we were my mom was like, go outside and play.
Right.
Go do something. You're not going to sit in front of the TV.
Because I had an hour and a half, and I would do homework if I had to do homework. I kind of didn't do homework for a long... But I would watch TV while I did homework, and then my brother would come home from his school, which let out way later. And my parents came home quickly after that. And then it was go outside and play until the streetlights come on. Basically,
that's what
us.
We were, yeah. And me and my brothers got along really well, so we would go out and build forts and play in the woods and all sorts of stuff.
I will say, too, I think another thing that might have killed it that I didn't mention is that Nintendo came out. So,
that's true.
Like
so a lot of times people were going on Nintendo.
My brother would come home, again, he would have maybe, I think I had an hour before he got home, and he had like a half hour before my dad got home. And he would play Nintendo during that time. He's not watching TV.
Right.
You know, or he'd be out playing with the other kids on our block. But I do remember, that they were not, some of them were not great. I remember that other ones, especially the ones I watched when I was a kid, like, I don't think I saw the Jodie Foster one, but I might have seen one of the ones with Drew Barrymore. And we didn't watch it, but I did find on YouTube one that has Corey Feldman and Drew Barrymore, and they're in a rehab. I don't mean to laugh. They're in rehab.
Yes.
And I'm like, did they intentionally find like young child stars who were struggling with drugs and then make them do a movie about being in rehab? Because it seems like that's exactly what happened.
Or did they put out a casting call and the two of them were like, we got this?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Like, if we can't play a teen in rehab, we should just hang up.
Yeah. It's interesting because Drew Barrymore went through that middle phase, like, before she became an adult star of, like...
Oh, by her teenage years, she was almost done with drugs. Like, she was doing coke in Studio 54 at 10 years old.
I actually, I think that, and I think she started when she was 8, but I believe that this movie was after she got divorced from her parents and all that.
Yeah, she probably was getting clean by this point.
She probably was. Yeah, I can't speak about Corey
Although
Feldman.
I'm thinking about it, I think she's my age, roughly. So, I mean, yeah, but that would still be...
Well, in the one that I saw, she was probably 15, and I think by that point she was cleaned up.
She was probably cleaned up, yeah.
At any rate, let's get into...
So the first episode, those people who remember watching our previous or listening to our previous episodes know that I got to choose one of these and you got to choose one.
Yes.
So I chose Andrea's story, a hitchhiking tragedy, right? And I chose this because I'm going to just give a little insight into Steve's brain. Okay? This is a new segment called Steve's Brain.
Oh, no.
So, a little insight. I know that some of these shows could go real dark. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to go there. So I was like, a hitchhiking story. Like, it's probably going to be like some girl or guy hitchhiking and some guy, like, creepy person picks them up and then they escape and they're like, oh my gosh, I'll never do that again, right? So I'm like, that sounds like a safe way to go.
Okay. So here's Megan's brain, contrary to Steve's brain. I was excited because I thought that Hitchhiking Tragedy might start with a murder. And I thought that it would be the friends of the murdered girl learning not to hitchhike.
Stop ruining my childhood. Okay? So I chose this hitchhiking story on purpose because I'm like, this is better than a lot of other places this could go.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, that being said, I was bait and switched by ABC.
Yeah.
Because this was not a hitchhiking story. It's really a sexual assault story.
Yeah, so that, again, trigger warning, and if you want to stop listening here and switch over to Who Will Save Gen X, you can hear us over on that show. But, yeah, now we are going to make fun of how they handled it because they did not handle it well.
They did not handle it well. But there's a lot more to do with the fact that Andrea was sexually assaulted while hitchhiking.
Yes.
Than actual hitchhiking.
Right.
That was kind of the means to the end, but it was more about how she handled and how she kind of tried to overcome. And also,
this one was done in 1983. Actually, both of our episodes, surprisingly, were from 83.
So they're season 12? 11 and 12?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Because,
this might have been 11 in the spring, and the other one was 12 in the fall.
Right, yeah, I'm not quite sure how they landed on that. But... the idea 83, I think people were still hitching, right? I know this, again, a boomer thing versus a Gen X thing. My parents definitely hitchhiked, especially my father. Yeah. I know for a fact. My dad went to Woodstock and apparently was like, this isn't for me, and left. Yeah. But he was in that generation where they would have been hitching.
We never hitchhiked.
I would never hitchhike.
I was told, like, if you hitchhike, someone's going to kill you.
No. I want to say this. This is a conversation I had with somebody the other day, and they were like, they're our age, and they were like, back in my day, they just let us go out anywhere we wanted. We rode our bikes around and we just came back at dark. How come people don't raise their kid like that anymore? And I go, because also back in my day, I sat in a cafeteria looking at another kid's face on my milk carton.
That's true.
So that's why I wouldn't, if I had kids, I would raise them a little differently.
But all that to say, dear audience, that Steve's brain was trying to choose, like, the most, maybe, easier, nicer one. And in reality, out of the two we're going to talk about today, I ended up choosing the much worse one.
So I know you normally give the summary, but I'm going to do it in this case. Mm-hmm. So, essentially, we have Andrea and her... There's a little bit of an intro or whatever where they're hitching, and it shows that they do this all the time. Right? Then we're taken to Andrea and her boyfriend a couple days later. The two of them decide they don't want to walk and they decide to hitch a ride. The man in the car drops off her boyfriend and he drives her past where he's supposed to drop her off.
Right.
And then we see Andrea come home with a bruise on her face and she's acting weird. She takes a shower and all of that. We learn later, and she tells, again, this is teens helping teens. So she tells her friend she's been assaulted. And then her friend encourages her to tell her parents and go to the police and all of that. So she reports to the police. She reports to her parents. She gets a lot of shame and blame that we're going to talk about later. And eventually, there's a lot of fallout from the assault. So we see her kind of dealing with it emotionally. She gets in touch with a rape crisis counselor, and she eventually is able to identify the guy that did this, and he's done it to other people, and it ends with they're going to prosecute him, and she's going to go to trial. So that's basically a brief overview. Let's take this point by point now. Now that I dealt with it seriously, they missed the bus in the beginning.
Right, to get home. So they decide to hitchhike. Yeah,
and we see that this is based on a book called Did You Hear What Happened to Andrea?
Yes.
And it's written by Gloria Miklowitz, who wrote these kind of teen problem novels. She also wrote After the Bomb, a book I have read. It's like a fictionalized, like what would like post-nuclear war kind of thing. But here we go. Okay, so Andrea's in the car with her boyfriend. The older man driving the car says, "You two going steady?" And what does Andrea's boyfriend say? Something like that. "Excuse me, David."
Yeah.
Everybody's concerned. This was an interesting point, too, Steve, because Andrea's mom, and apparently David's parents as well, they're concerned that they're spending too much time together, and they tell them repeatedly that they should date around.
Yeah, especially Andrea's mom. She's like, I think she should be dating more, dating around more. Why?
My only thought about that, possibly, I think that was a thing in the 70s, 80s. And here's why. Because more girls were being encouraged to go to college. So I think a lot of the parents who were like boomer silent generation got married straight out of high school. Now more girls are going to college. So I think they're like, don't get too serious with your boyfriend.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was going to be like something about teen pregnancy or something else.
But still, I mean, I would never tell my daughter, like, just play the field.
Yeah.
Like, why are you just why do you have one boyfriend? Like, get out and play, go check it out. Go on a number of dates. First off, I would tell my daughter, if you're not ready to get married, you shouldn't be dating, right? Because that's the only reason is to find somebody to marry, right? If you don't have a car and you got to take a bus and then hitchhike, you're not ready to get married. Especially if David doesn't have a car to drive you.
I think that you can date to find a little bit more about yourself, to find out about the type of person that you want to be with.
Go to a yoga retreat if you want to find out about yourself.
No, I think that don't go to a yoga retreat. You're not going to find any. No, I think that sometimes dating, especially like dating in a group, right? Mm-hmm. You do find out how to socialize, what kind of person you want to date, what kind of person you want to be with. And I didn't do that, and I eventually found my way to you, Speedy, but it was a harder road. I don't know. At any rate, So, David says something like that, even though they've been talking about what they're going to do when he leaves for college and all that. The music lets us know that something is wrong.
Yeah.
So the driver's like, I have 3 kids. They're about your age. I don't like that. Balding, weird guy. It's okay if you're bald. But this guy, he's meant to look, I don't know. They made it look a little like... He looks like a sitcom dad.
Yeah.
And I think that was intentional. Because you're not going to get in a car with somebody who looks sketchy. Right? So this is somebody who's super friendly, has 3 kids. David just gets out of the car and lets her ride home with a stranger.
Yeah, they go to David's house first. And, well, he's basically, it's discussed, like, you know, if she wants to get out with David. And she was like, well, yeah. Because at first she's like, I'll get out because I only live right around the corner.
Yeah.
And then... the guy is like, oh, no, it's no big deal. I'm going that way anyway. I can just drop you.
Yeah.
But if you're David, you should have been like, no, you know what? Why don't you stay here with me why don't you come in and we can do homework or something?
Yeah, listen.
You don't let your girlfriend be in the car alone
Steve,
with
some of these
guy.
People never had stranger danger in their school, and it shows.
No, they had missed the bus, hitchhike.
I know.
Jump into a stranger's car.
This is 83. By the time you and I were coming through school, this is why Gen X is more cynical. Because there's no way in heck I would ever hitchhike, number one. If I did, I would have some kind of a weapon on me because I got to be prepared. Yeah. Number 2. Number 3, I'm not even letting this guy see where I live. Right? So the idea that he's going to drop me off at home, no. I'm going to go in with David and make sure that car leaves. Yes. And then have David walk me home. Right? I'm not wearing a ponytail, Steve, because that's how they get you. That's how they get you. They grab you by your ponytail.
You know, it's because we were taught, obviously, the dangers of hitchhiking, but both ways. When I started driving, I was told, don't pick up hitchhikers because they could kill you. Yeah. You don't know what stranger is getting in a car with another stranger. It's not a good mix.
Having said that, the chances of 2 serial killers being in the car at the same time are low.
That's right.
Having said that, this is the kind of thing, this is why this is on TV, right? Because they don't have this type of education. That's true. And this is how kids learned back then. So, here's the thing. Okay, we have a very serious moment. Andrea comes home. She runs up the stairs. She looks into the mirror and touches her bruises. If you're aware of this type of storytelling, you know what's happened. Right. She takes a shower. Now, if you don't, and this is new to you, in 1983, you may be wondering, did he hit her? Did he rob her? Whatever. That's true. But then we cut downstairs to the family. And the dad is breaking out a salad for dinner and making fun of Italian people in a really bizarre...
He's got jokes. He thinks he's funny.
It's like dad humor, and he's like, hey, who's got the salad tonight? Hey, da, 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 da. And I'm like, why is he making fun of Italian people?
And her brother is a very young Kirk Cameron.
Yes, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, very young Kirk Cameron.
Yeah,
who doesn't have a whole lot of lines in this movie.
No, he doesn't, and he really is, if you didn't see the name before, he's really unrecognizable almost. Yeah, so... What's interesting to me is that at this point we kind of see things from the parents' perspective, and I think it's trying to show teens watching that your parents maybe are good people, but they don't know what's going on with you, and they just maybe want to help, but they don't know how. Yeah. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So then Andrea meets up with her friend Kim the next morning, and Kim says, the mall's too far away, let's just hitch. And Andrea freaks out.
Well, yeah, because last time she hitched, yesterday, she was assaulted.
So Kim goes, what's wrong? He looks safe. Kim, that's how you get murdered times. So Andrea admits to her friend that she was assaulted.
Yep. And Kim has the good sense to tell her she should go to the police.
Yeah. So here's my issue, and this is why we need Law & Order SVU, okay? Mm-hmm. I know that you don't love that show, but there are studies that show that, like, people who have at least seen a couple episodes understand better how rape victims are treated and how to treat them and what you might go through if you're in that situation. Because she goes to the police. And what happens, Steve? How do they treat her when she's there?
Well, I mean, they don't treat her with like the caring that they should. But I don't think that they were mean to her.
The guy is like, well, you threw away your clothes. There goes my physical evidence. You took a shower. What the hell were you thinking?
He didn't say it like that. He was a little bit more professional than that. And I'm going to say, you and I viewed this very differently. Because I saw this as one of the few good pieces to this. Because they're teaching someone who's watching this, hey, if this happens, you shouldn't throw away the clothes that might have evidence. You shouldn't take a shower before you call the police, right? To me, it actually was giving some good advice by telling her, hey, you shouldn't have done that, telling why.
I think that if they had, after she reported, in a caring way, said, we usually tell people it's okay and what you did was not, it's not your fault, but we usually tell people not to do that and do it that way. Because what I put in my notes is, no wonder girls don't report. Because if I saw, I'd be like, I'm not going to go and have the police tell me I did everything wrong.
I think that is a good point as well, is that it does show the difference between how this was, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, Ice-T wouldn't have handled things that way.
No, he wouldn't have.
But I thought that I thought that was needed in the story because... And he's not reprimanding her.
No, he's not.
He wasn't being a jerk about it. The guy that plays the detective, actually, I felt like, because he gives her the card for, like, the hotline.
Well, he gives it to her mom later.
Well, he gives it to her mom first, yeah. And then when he finds out that she never got it, he gives her one.
Later, he gives it to her,
and he kind of follows up. So, I mean, he could have been better, but I didn't think he was it's not like, I mean, we've heard stories back in the 70s and 80s where girls showed up and they'd be like, well, was it your boyfriend? What were you? Yeah, and he didn't do that.
No, he didn't.
Right?
So it does show kind of the time. I mean, also, the way her parents react is so ridiculous.
Her parents were way worse than the cops, I thought.
Now... Pause for a moment before we get into her parents, because this is a very serious... I can't do it without laughing. This is a very serious scene in the police station. And Steve goes, Megan, pause the video. And I pause it. And there's a girl in the background in full-out Flashdance attire.
Yeah, oh yeah.
She looks like she came from...
The leg warmers, the headband.
She looks like she came from a Jane Fonda workout.
The leotard with a half shirt over it. I mean, legit, she could have stepped right out of Flashdance.
I was hoping to find out why she was at the police station. We never find out. It's just a background performer in what was considered normal attire.
Yeah. Just came from the gym, decided to stop by the police station.
So, Andrea goes home. Her mom basically blames her for getting in the car. Her dad says, they better find him before I do. Then the mom says, and they tested her for VD. And the dad just about loses his freaking mind.
Right.
He's like throwing stuff around the kitchen. And he yells at her for not telling them. But this is why she didn't tell you, dude. Now,
he's angry, which is... I understand he's angry because he feels like he should be protecting her. He's the dad. He's angry she didn't tell. But at the same time, I felt the mom was way worse than the dad.
Oh, way worse. Way worse. Because the mom is like... a suburban mom who's like, let's just forget this happened.
Yeah, the mom didn't want to go to the police. The mom didn't want to press charges. The mom didn't want to talk about it ever again.
No. And she also didn't give her the number for the hotline. Like, just get over it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Just get over it. Meanwhile, the brother, Kirk Cameron, wants to know what's going on. She basically tells him a kid's version of this, which is that she was hitchhiking, there was a bad man, and he beat her up.
Right.
I thought that was really appropriate, what she said. Then the mom comes in and yells at her for saying anything to him.
It didn't happen. Why are you telling some people about it?
Yeah, but the thing is, I think this is the reason for this show, because you do have parents who would do that.
Yeah.
And you have people who would want to,
And then the mom tells her not to wear a shirt out to the mall because it's not appropriate, and that might happen again.
Yeah, it's a purple shirt. People are going to look at you funny,
Yeah.
But she goes back to the cop, and he says, it's not just your crisis. Your parents don't know what to do. I thought that was interesting. I feel like on the one hand, it puts more pressure on her, like this is their crisis too, and you kind of caused it. On the other hand, I think, a lot of these things it's like from a sociologist perspective, it's a family system, right. A social worker perspective, right? That they are affected by it. They want to protect her and keep her safe, and they don't know what to do or how to help her. David, then we see he comes in and he blames himself.
Yes.
Oh, also by this point, she has agreed with her mom to go out with other people.
She stops seeing David because she's embarrassed.
Yeah, she is.
But David starts riding his bike to the corner where they were picked up by this guy, and is doing some serious reconnaissance.
Yeah.
Trying to see this guy's car again and get a license plate.
Yeah, and I actually thought that was kind of neat because David he's confused about how to interact with her, which I think is typical.
Yes.
Especially because it's pretty much hinted at that they have not been intimate together.
Right.
He's told the police what kind of car it is, but he is going to try to find the license plate and help out and whatever in whatever way he can. Then we have Kim again, who says to Andrea, "You're all hung up on your own feelings." F you, Kim, you ball of toxic positivity.
Because meanwhile, Andrea is having nightmares and stuff, and PTSD from this.
Yeah, and her parents are arguing about how to handle it, whether they should go to court if they ever find the guy. But Kim says, "Just act normal and you'll be normal."
Yeah,
which is
fake it till you make it.
Which is advice that I got as a teenager. Yeah, many times. I'm depressed. Well, just get up and get dressed and put on some makeup. Okay.
Put on a happy face.
Yeah, that'll do it. That won't make me shove my feelings down inside of me. So she pretends everything is fine until, as you said, she has more PTSD.
Right.
Right? She sees a car, she walks the other way, the cars are everywhere, and then she gets to a payphone, and this is interesting because I thought she was going to call her mom or her friend, and she doesn't. She takes out the card and she calls the Rape Crisis Center.
Right.
And it's at this point that things kind of turn around for her. I like that they didn't, completely solve it.
No, but she starts talking to them more often and getting help.
Yeah, and she goes, then she's with Kim again, and she's in her bedroom, and she goes, what happened wasn't my fault. And, how I'm feeling is normal, feeling dirty and wishing it never happened.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, Andrea, but...
Everyone in your life... The stranger in the hotline is the only one that told you that.
I know, it's so sad. But that's again, that's why they're trying to have this special, right? This
is the 80s, Megan. This is
how we
roll.
I know, but it's just oh no, of course it wasn't your fault. Yeah. This is very similar to this was not an after school special. It was primetime because they got some big names, but I think originally it might have been an after school special. There's this movie with Ted Danson where and he abuses his daughter.
Yeah.
And at the end, the therapist is like, it wasn't your fault, but now that we've talked about it and it's out in the open, we can just go back to normal. And they're like, okay. And that's how the movie ends. And it's kind of like this. They really didn't, I feel like they're just starting to be, it's not like assault or abuse hadn't happened in the past. I don't think it was talked about as openly until after the sexual revolution.
Right.
So you still have these beginning nascent stages of people, that's the second time I use this word on the show, but you have these beginning stages of people trying to understand it, but still not quite understanding.
Right.
And so she's going through this thing where she finally realizes it wasn't her fault, and her mom's like, just stop talking about it.
Yeah.
And she's like, but Louisa says, and her mom's like, who's Louisa?
Meanwhile, David does see the car again. He gets the license plate, and the police are able to pick up the guy.
Yeah.
And Andrea makes the decision that she does want to go to trial, so she goes in and does a lineup. And chooses him.
Yeah, I really liked that they made it very clear that was not something she had to do.
Right.
And it was her choice, and by that point, she is empowered to make that decision.
Yeah.
Because she's been through some of the counseling. Not as much as she needs, but some of it. And the policeman says, well, he did this to another girl. she had the physical evidence we needed.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Not like you, Andrea,
lucky,
you idiot. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, she decides to testify, and if they're both up for testifying, it's a better case.
Right, because they have the girl with the physical evidence, and then they have another one corroborating that. Yes.
And then it ends on a happy note until the camera pans over, and as they're leaving the police station, another girl is sticking out her thumb to catch a ride.
Come on.
And it repeats itself again.
Yeah.
And Steve goes, "That looks like Ted Bundy's car."
Yeah, as a pale yellow bug drives by.
It was a pale. Yeah, it was a VW bug. Ironically.
So that was Andrea's story. A lot darker than what Steve thought he was getting into.
And then we got to the one that Megan picked, which was not as dark as I had hoped. And I was very disappointed.
We come from two different places, apparently.
So, It's No Crush, I'm in Love. I in part picked it because it had Cynthia Nixon in it. I didn't realize she was a child star or had been a child actor. So that I thought was kind of interesting. My hope for this movie was that it would be about a girl who has a crush and it becomes a little obsessive and she has to get help for it. That was my hope. My secondary hope was that if it wasn't that plot line, that it would be a girl and a guy who they're like too serious and they're like maybe in 9th grade or something.
It's like Romeo and Juliet.
And they're maybe thinking about having sex and people are like, it's just a crush. They're like, it's not a crush, I'm in love. It was neither one of those two things.
Well, it was about...
I was so disappointed.
It was almost the first one.
No, well, almost.
She was sort of obsessed, but not to the point where, like...
So this is, again, It's Not a Crush, I'm in Love, is based on a book by June Foley, who was a writer of teen romances. Mm-hmm. And basically, it's supposed to be like a rom-com kind of thing, where it's a teenage girl played by Cynthia Nixon. She has a crush on her English teacher, Mr. Angelucci, and in the meantime, there's a boy from the school newspaper who's crushing on her.
Yep.
And she can't see him because Mr. Angelucci is so dreamy, except he's not.
Yeah, I call BS on this right off the bat.
Wait, so at any rate, it goes through her having a crush. Eventually she realizes that it's not right, and then she kind of lets it go. But it's like a series of mishaps of her trying to get this guy's attention and failing miserably.
And overplaying the interactions that they are having.
Yeah. So why do you call BS?
Well, because I was a high school English teacher for many years, okay? And nobody was ever in love with me. No girls were ever in love with me. And I'm hot as all get out.
That you know of.
I'm definitely hotter than Mr. Angelucci.
Mr. Angelucci definitely did not know that this girl was crushing on him at all.
Yeah. I'm not saying I was looking for that. I'm just saying it seems a little far-fetched.
I'm not hot as all get out, and I've had multiple students hit on me.
You're a college professor. That's a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah.
The point was, I feel like
they don't
most
now because I talk about
girls,
you all the time.
Like we've seen this trope in like movies and stuff before.
Yeah.
But I feel like in real life, you do get occasionally a news story. But in real life, most high school kids don't view their teachers that way. They view their teachers like, oh, my teacher, they're a pain in the butt. They're always like looking for my homework. They're coming, even when they have a good relationship with their teachers, which I tended to with my students, it was definitely an adult kid interaction.
Because you have proper boundaries, though.
Yeah,
because I know a teacher from my high school who did cross boundaries with students, and I actually was called later on to find out if I knew, because my father worked at the same school. They weren't asking me if I had a relationship with this guy. They were asking me if I knew about, and I said, yes, this person, this person, this person. Right. And I tried to tell them when I was in high school, and they didn't listen. I had a crush on a teacher. There was no way. He had proper boundaries. He was never going to look at any student in that capacity.
Like Mr. Angelucci, who doesn't
Mr. Angelucci does not see her at all in that way. But I think that I also had a teacher who made inappropriate comments about young men. And never was brought to task for that. And I don't know. I just watched a documentary on, I think it was Hulu, about this girl who had been groomed by her teacher and stuff. And so you could see this going two ways.
Right.
But Cynthia Nixon, the music here is a lot boppier than the last one.
Yeah, it's a young Cynthia Nixon, but Cynthia Nixon is interesting because some people when they're younger and then adults, you go, oh, okay, interesting. Cynthia Nixon looks like Cynthia Nixon.
She looks exactly the same.
Even at 16 or 15 or whatever she is.
Yeah.
Except she's blonde.
Like, she's really beautiful in this. Yes. Yeah. I mean, she's pretty now. And she's a beautiful woman, but wow, she was like gorgeous. So anyway, in the book, from what I can tell, I think I read this book. Mm-hmm. The girl is obsessed with like Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, like those kind of books. And and this English teacher likes those books. And she wants to have like, how would Elizabeth Bennet act? Right. How would Juliet act? Here, we have a girl who's just moonstruck about soap operas. Yeah,
and this teacher looks exactly like the guy on the soap opera that she has a crush on as well.
Now, I don't know if they made into a movie the one starring her friend, but her friend's name is Rebecca Sekelbaum. They never use her first name until the very end. It's just, hey, Sekelbaum? Yeah. And I'm like, who is she talking to? Yeah. Sekelbaum wants to be a prison warden when she grows up. I find
Sekelbaum doesn't mix words. She's just like, this is what I do.
Yeah, and she's very straightforward. The girls are all giggling over Mr. Angelucci in a way that, you know what this reminded me of? The beginning of the first Indiana Jones movie. Where all the girls are like,
the college girls are,
Except that Mr. Angelucci just looks like a normal dude. There's no reason to be giggling over him at all. And she's love-struck because he looks like the man in the magazine. He's exciting and brave and handsome. And he says, great literature is just as thrilling as your soap operas.
Yeah, because that's what English teachers say. I used to peddle that as well.
Nobody was picking up what you were laying down.
Great novels are just as good as movies. That was a lie. I would rather watch a movie than you know. I was an English teacher forever. I'm an author, and you know what I want to tell you. You know what's great about movies? No reading.
Stop it! I can't believe that you would rather. Oh,
it's over in an hour and a half.
I'd rather listen to an audiobook than read a book. These are truths from English teachers. Yeah. I'm an English teacher now, and I'm like, is that book available as an audiobook? Yeah. Can I get it on Audible or for free someplace else?
Is that available on Audible? No. I'm going to pass.
I'm not reading
I'll wait.
One of my students just had a book that came out, somebody who I mentored, and I was like, is it on Audible? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, great. Part of that, though, is because we read so much for work that our brains are like, I can't.
Yeah, I can't. I don't want to just do it. Yeah.
So anyway, she runs home to watch. This is my favorite part of this episode. She runs home to watch her soap opera, which is called The Searching Heart.
Of course it is.
Now, I'm going to say that the first one we watched moved along at a pretty good clip. It kept my interest. It was interesting to me sociologically how that topic was dealt with in the early 80s as opposed to now. Mm-hmm. This one just, it dragged. It really, we were 20 minutes in and I said to Steve, can I switch to a different one? Because I had found that one with Drew Barrymore on YouTube.
Like, no, we stick with it.
The Drew Barrymore one would have been better.
More because I was like, we've already gone 20 minutes. We're only 25 minutes from the end. I'm not starting all over with a new story.
I also found the one, I think it's Rob or Chad Lowe, and it's like I was a teenage father.
Oh, okay. There is a connection to soap operas, which were big in the 80s. I'm going to be honest, even as a kid, I mentioned before I used to get babysat by like my grandfather. Very often my grandmother would be home too sometimes depending on her job. Mm-hmm. And so I was sort of as a young kid when I was being babysat that way before I ended up like being a latchkey kid a little bit. Mm-hmm. I would watch soap operas with them. And so, I remember, I don't know what network it was, but I remember the lineup of All My Children, mm-hmm. Days of Our Lives, and General Hospital. That was those were my...
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to watch soap operas, but nobody was home at that time. And I kind of went in between. When did I start that? I think when I was in like 8th or 9th grade. the Guiding Light was on. And what interested me about Guiding Light was that it was the oldest show on TV. It had been a radio show. And I love old time radio.
Yeah.
And I had listened to a couple of the radio episodes, and then I watched the TV show, and I started watching it. And one day my mom was homesick, and I was like, I was probably in 9th or 10th grade, and this was still a secret. It had been a secret for like 4 years that I had been watching this show. My mom was homesick, and we were watching TV, and I was like, she's like, what's wrong with you? And I go, I have to find out what happens on Guiding Light. And she laughed and she goes, oh, I used to watch that show. And I was like, what? Like, I had no idea. She really, by that point, I was in 10th grade. I was like 15. Who cares?
Yeah.
No,
I was like 5 or 6 when I watched soap operas. And because, I shipped Luke and Laura on General Hospital. Oh, man.
That's way back.
I was super young. Now, Luke and Laura was a whole different situation. Yeah. That's for another podcast. But it was.
We'll have to try to find that and revisit. I think they have them on Hulu, the old episodes. But anyway, getting back to this show, she starts trying to dress more maturely, and they're reading Wuthering Heights,
like a Victorian librarian.
Yeah. What's hilarious? Okay, there's a couple things. Well, the Victorian look kind of had a throwback in the 80s, like high collars and long skirts and things. But what I also find funny is that this stupid class of 9th graders is reading Wuthering Heights. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I can't deal with it. Then we have Robbie. Robbie's trying to kind of flirt with Anne, and she is not getting what's going on. She and Sekelbaum at different points stalk the teacher. They sit outside his house.
And Sekelbaum at one point goes, Robbie's into you. And she goes, he's just a kid.
So are you, Anne?
He's the same age you are, Anne.
I kind of wondered if Anne was supposed to be modeled a little after Anne of Green Gables, because it is like very like romantic imagination, and she's picturing all of these things.
She's daydreaming.
Yeah, she's daydreaming quite a bit. She joins the paper because the teacher, she thinks it'll impress him. Right? So she's trying to do different things to get to know him. So first she stakes out his house with Sekelbaum, who's like, what are we doing? Then she joins the newspaper. And
who's the editor?
Robbie. And he wants her to interview the new gym teacher. And she says, no, I have this great idea. I'm going to ask kids, who would be your favorite literary character to go on a date with?
Yeah, she goes, I can't interview a gym teacher. That's not real journalism. I need to impress the teacher. And it comes to find out the teacher doesn't care about the paper. He was forced to be the advisor.
Yeah. And then she says, maybe I could interview the gym teacher. Maybe I can take a feminist angle on it. Because she's a gym teacher. I don't understand that. But it's a lot like a bad sitcom. Like, you could see this, it's dragged out, but you could see this being like an episode of a sitcom.
Right.
Like, this week, Anne gets a crush on her teacher. Next week, she and Robbie go to the movies for the first time,
Then the teacher mentions to her that he's working on his thesis, his doctoral thesis, and he needs a research assistant, so she volunteers to do that.
Yes.
On Saturdays.
And what is she doing, though? She's looking for semicolons.
She's looking for semicolons in Shakespeare.
Yeah, and he doesn't even eat lunch with her, like he sends her out. This is a guy who very clearly does not care, right? Then
I need you to look through all the Shakespeare for semicolons. You didn't own a rack that you could stretch her on?
I know.
Like there was nothing worse you could come up with?
So, and also, that's your PhD? You're doing your dissertation on semicolons and
Run now, Anne, because first off, he's never going to be a doctor. Okay, so he's going down the wrong path already, Anne. You need to, you deserve better.
Then he asks her to go out to dinner, sort of. He's like, hey, let's catch dinner. Robbie's asked her to the homecoming dance. Mm-hmm. He asks her to go to dinner. She forgets about the homecoming dance, stands Robbie up. Mm-hmm. And they go and they have chili dogs, which is not the romantic thing that she had pictured.
Right. He makes her research late and then takes her for chili dogs.
Yeah.
And she doesn't stand up Robbie. She tells Robbie she can't go because then Robbie takes Seagull Bomb.
That's right. You're right. So he takes Seagull Bomb, who I was really shipping Robbie and Seagull Bomb.
Yeah.
Like, I was really hoping the two of them would just ditch this crazy girl and get together.
But Seagull Bomb is just a frumpy friend. She doesn't get that.
So he and Seagull Bomb bought each other corsages, we find out later.
Yeah.
She insisted on corsages, but she's like, I'll pay for yours. So at the Chili Dog restaurant, she meets Mr. Angelucci's fiance.
Yes.
Oh.
Heartbreaking.
She realizes what she's been doing is kind of silly. She tries to make it up to Robbie. She makes it up with Seagull Bomb. And then she has one last moment at the end where she calls him. She's like been invited out to Robbie's, but has a party that night. Yeah,
it's a party for his thesis, and he said he invited her because she helped work on it.
And she goes, she calls him and she goes, "Hello, this is Anne." And he goes, "Anne who?" Now, I understand that you don't have feelings for this girl, but she's been in your classroom and
every Saturday working with you in the library.
For 8 hours a day, pretty much.
Yeah.
She's your research assistant, Anne who? Yeah.
You're going to call me and be like, "Hey, this is Megan." I'm going to be like, "Who dis?"
New phone.
Megan who? And you're like, "Your wife." I'm like,
So anyway, she says, this is Anne, your research assistant. I can't come to your party. And he's like, "Okay." Like, nobody cares.
He's like, "I forgot I invited you."
Yeah, exactly. And then she gets off the phone and she's like, "Anne, who?" And then she runs and she
realizes that she didn't mean anything really to him.
She kind of realized it before that, but at that point it's like solidified.
Yeah. There was a terrible heartburn, and it wasn't the chili dogs.
That's
it was
true.
Loss of love.
It's loss of love. Half of love is low.
Yeah, half of love is just low.
So she goes back to Robbie and they go on their date, and Seagull Bomb, I don't know, finds love wherever she's gonna find love.
Right.
And that's how that one ends. So it was kind of interesting, at least to me, that we picked two that were so different. Mm-hmm. I was really happy with kind of the way that fell out.
They were very different.
Before we get to how we felt about it, how did people at the time, what was the reception?
So the first one we talked about, which was Audrey's story, right?
Andrea's story,
yeah, my bad. On IMDb, it was given a 6.2 out of 10. Okay. But interestingly enough, one of the people talks about this and says, there's really two pieces to this that jumped out at them, one of the critics.
Okay.
Right? The first was Kirk Cameron as the brother.
Yeah.
And the second one was the mother, who you will want to slap the nonsense out of.
Yeah.
And that's a quote from the person writing this.
That's hilarious.
Because this girl is sexually abused, and the mother blames her. Yeah. Tells her that she can't wear certain clothing.
She shouldn't be dating her boyfriend.
Yeah, she shouldn't be. She basically, forget about this. Let's not talk about it again.
Yeah.
It's just everything wrong that a parent could do, this mother does.
You believe it, though.
Yeah, it's the worst thing ever, right?
She is a good actress in that I hated her.
Yeah. And so most people kind of agreed, obviously, with that. And so it was about a 6.2.
Okay.
The second one was a 6.9.
Really?
It was actually rated a little bit higher. A lot of people like Cynthia Nixon's acting.
Okay.
And thought it was realistic in the fact that she didn't become super obsessed.
Right.
This really, I think, would have connected with kids more because it wouldn't have been like, really?
Yeah.
Like, like I said, it seemed a little off the nose to me. But if you were somebody who had a crush on their teacher, this is probably how it ended.
Yeah.
You probably realized, they don't think of me that way, and I'm stupid.
I had a crush on my teacher for like 2 weeks, and that was it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And unlike the music teacher that ended up having a number of girlfriends, for the most part, I also think it was humorous, but it wasn't so far over the top that, like, you did believe that, that's what girls do. They go and like, let's check out the house the boy we like.
Yes.
I'm going to offer to, maybe I'm going to join a club because the boy I like is in the club. I'm not going to say I did that, but I did that 100%.
So overall, the ABC Afterschool Specials, for 25 seasons, they won 51 Daytime Emmys.
That's crazy.
That's a lot. I mean, we had a lot with Reading Rainbow.
Yeah.
But that's a lot. And TV Guide named it the best kids show of the 80s.
Really? Okay. That's interesting. Because also, I don't think of it as a kids show. But I guess if you're counting with teens.
You're counting all the way to teens, yeah.
51 Daytime Emmys. And I'm going to guess that
That's almost 2 every season, right? Yeah. I mean, you got 25 seasons.
Because some of these, you can kind of, even when you look, there's some that I wish that we had watched that got recognition. There's one called The Wave, which is about a teacher not having a crush on a student, but it's about a teacher who tries to teach his students about fascism and how the Nazis took power, and then it becomes like almost it's like Stanford prison experiment, but in high school almost, where they try to replicate some things. There's the other one I mentioned with Corey Feldman and Drew Barrymore, I think did pretty well. Was well received. The one of the teenage father, and the one we didn't watch that I just kind of alluded to the other just a couple minutes ago. I think it was called Am I Gay or What If I'm Gay? And the main kid turns out not to be gay. He just has these people thinking.
He's just wondering what if.
He has magazines where men are scantily clad, but it's because he wants to be a bodybuilder. But then he questions his sexuality a little bit, but one of his friends turns out to be gay. And he kind of learns, hey, he's still my friend. It's okay if he's gay or whatever. Right. I think that's kind of how that ends. The one with the teenage father of, here, at that point in time, teenage pregnancy was higher.
Oh, yeah.
And STDs were a problem. So I kind of feel like I can understand why they won some Emmys for some of them. Some of them are horribly written.
Yeah. It wasn't for acting, maybe.
No, but maybe not. So how did we feel about it? It's difficult because this is like a taste in a weird way that we don't normally get with other TV shows that we watch.
Yeah. I like the idea. But the execution lacks a bit. Yeah. And if I'm looking, does this hold up? I gotta say no. I don't think you could pull this off today unless you really, really change the formatting and everything, right? I just don't see it happening as much. So I would have to give it because of that. And it's not my cup of tea, but we've talked about not everything is. Some of these are right up my alley, some of them aren't. So I would have to give it a 4.
Okay. I'm not too far off from where you are. I think, my memory of these is that it's like the ones we watch. Some are hits and some are misses, right? Like you said, I think what they were trying to do, and I think for the time, the fact that a lot of people didn't have comprehensive health education or sex ed in schools. A lot of people didn't know who to turn to if they were assaulted or how to deal with it. And those are things that we do know today. I will say, you and I know them. If I talk to a 13-year-old girl, is she going to know not to throw out her clothes if somebody hurts her? I don't know that she would. But I think that we know some teenagers, and if we sat them down in front of this, they would be laughing their butts off. Right. As we were laughing the entire time we were watching them. Right. Now, the second one was supposed to be funny, but the first one was unintentionally funny. Yes. Because it was just done so badly and heavy-handed. But I think, some of the other ones that I saw some clips of and things, I'm going to go with a 5. I think I get what they're trying to do. It didn't ruin my childhood because it was pretty much what I expected it to be. Right. But I don't think it holds up. And I think that thankfully now we have better conversations around this stuff. And if they were going to make, a very special episode about it on some TV show or a TV show that dealt with it, I think it would be done in a much more nuanced way. Okay. In a way that was maybe even more helpful. So... Yeah! 4.5 textbooks out of 10. 4.5 out of 10 for the show.
3.5 out of 5 for the Capri Sun.
For the Capri Sun. Now, technically, this was our movie week. I do want to apologize because our bonus episode for Labor Day was supposed to be a true bonus. And then I had to have emergency surgery. And so it was not a true bonus. We just played it that week kind of take that
Office Space.
Take that off. If you haven't heard Office Space, it's definitely, in my opinion, one of our better episodes. And I also thought that we had fun revisiting it.
Yeah, give it a listen. Don't switch that podcast channel.
Yeah, but we just finished up a cycle. So we had Scooby-Doo, which went viral somehow.
Scooby-Doo's awesome anyway, so yeah.
I'm not surprised that it happened with Scooby-Doo, but we're just very thankful. We had been thinking we would hit 10,000 downloads maybe by next year, because by the time we've been doing this about a year, and then our numbers started going up, and we were like, well, maybe by Christmas. And we already surpassed it. And
we're closing in on 11,000.
I think we got 11 today.
Oh, okay.
And so we're just really grateful for the downloads and listens and all of your support. So we had Scooby-Doo, Reading Rainbow, and then this was our movie pick. Yep. The Afterschool Specials.
ABC Afterschool Specials.
And now we're going to start up another cycle, and we're going to round out our back to school stuff with the Magic School Bus. And then we're going to get into some Halloween stuff.
Yes,
for October
time.
October time. So, all right, now, what is Steve willing to watch? Okay, so we have the Magic School Bus. We are going to, because of what I could find and where I could find it, we're going to watch episodes from the first season, which would have been 1994. I want to note that it's surprising to me because I remember the books, and the books came out like in the mid 80s.
They probably just didn't do the cartoon until way later.
Yeah, and what's interesting, we almost watched the episode of Magic School Bus for Reading Rainbow, and that came out, I think, in like 85.
Gotcha.
So, at any rate, 1994, and here are your choices. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Lost in Space.
Okay.
The Magic School Bus Gets Eaten, which has to do with the ocean.
Okay.
In the Haunted House, which is a sound museum.
Okay.
Play Ball, which is a frictionless baseball game.
Okay.
Goes to Seed, which is the class garden. Mm-hmm. And Kicks Up a Storm, which should be self-explanatory.
Okay. I gotta go with Space.
Okay. You're not going to go with a frictionless baseball game?
Space.
All right. So my pick is the Magic School Bus Goes Inside Ralphie.
Okay.
Because I love the Disney ride Body Wars.
All right.
And I think it's going to be a lot like that. Steve's pick is the Magic School Bus Lost in Space. And I think that those will be some pretty interesting episodes.
Yeah,
so we have that.
To it.
So actually, after the Magic School Bus, we're going to have a special bonus for Halloween, but way before Halloween.
We kick off October.
We kick off October because Hocus Pocus 2 comes out September 30th.
Yep.
So to celebrate, we're going to revisit the original.
Hocus Pocus.
And one of us enjoys that movie and one of us doesn't.
You'll have to wait to find out which one.
After that, we're going to watch The Pretender, which is kind of like dressing up like you do on Halloween. And then we're going to start really into our Halloween stuff with The Real Ghostbusters. And we're going to go into, and then Buffy. So that's what's coming up. Hopefully we might change it up, but I think that's our game plan for right now. Thank you so much for listening. My name's Megan.
And I'm Steve.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.